Good evening, everybody. My name is Erika Sanzi. I'm the Director of Outreach here at Parents Defending Education. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So we are going to talk about school boards. You are probably not surprised to know that school boards are a topic about which we get many questions and about which we just hear a lot out in the media and the culture at large. So we decided that we were going to bring on people who can help you better understand what a school board is, what it can do, what it can't do, as well as the differences between school boards based on where you may live. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our wonderful and talented guests. Tonight we have Libby Sobic. She's the Director of Education Policy at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We also have Chris Arend, School Board President for Paso Robles Joint Unified School District in California, and my colleague Scarlen Valderaz, who works for us here at Parents Defending Education as a Public School Advocacy Associate. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Chris, we're going to start with you. You are a sitting school board member. And I know what that's like because I did serve a 2-year term from 2010 to 2012. So you have my great admiration. Can you help us understand who comprises the school board? How did they get on that school board? What's that process like? And are there any specific requirements in order for a person to be on a school board?
Sure. Well, in California, you get on the school board as a general rule by getting elected unless there's been a vacancy and you've been appointed. Now, the school board elections in California, they're theoretically nonpartisan elections. You don't have an R or a D next to your name when you go on the ballot. However, that's the formal aspect. In reality, party politics does play a role. The local county party organizations, they endorse candidates and they put out flyers with their recommendations for who to vote for. Now, by the way, in my own case, I'm up for re-election this coming Tuesday or Tuesday in a week. And although I have been on the Central Committee of the Republican Party and very active there were some internal personal politicking going on, and I didn't get the endorsement of the Republican Party in our county. But I may still have a chance of getting reelected simply by going out there. And fortunately, in our district, it's a relatively small district. I've got about 2,000 families or so in my area in our district, and so it's been walking a lot door to door and talking to people. The terms of office, we're elected as a general rule for 4 years. If there's a special election to fill a vacancy, it might be only 2 years. But as a general rule, we're elected for 4 years. The pay is kind of an interesting topic. In the state of California, the pay for a school board member depends on the number of students in the school district. Now, in our school district with about 6,500 students, I get paid the enormous amount of about $270 a month, which sort of pays for gas money to get into town for the meetings. That's about it. The highest pay in California is theoretically $24,000, except in Los Angeles, where the school board members make $125,000. And they have large staffs and so on, which brings us a little bit to the aspect about how much time and how much work is involved in the office. And aside from going to 2 school board meetings a month, each one which can last anywhere from about 3 to 5 hours, maybe a bit longer even, the workload is basically how much you want to do. If you want to delve into the details of the purchase order lists and so on, have at it. It's a waste of time, but we've got a couple members who like to get in there and spend hours going through the lists of purchase orders. I find it's good to focus on the main issues that are in front of the school board that are current in the school district, and especially leave management to to our superintendent and the staff. We have an excellent superintendent, excellent staff. That hasn't always been the case in our school district, but you leave the detail work to them. Focus on the main issues is the important thing. Did I just hear somebody?
Yes, you heard my dogs, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
They heard somebody come in downstairs.
This is like one other thing. Some people think that in order to be on a school board, you have to be an educator, you have to be a retired teacher, or you have to be an administrator or a counselor or something like that, or have a master's degree in education. Absolutely not. That's not necessary. You have to have some common sense, good. It helps to have some decent analytic abilities. By profession, I'm a lawyer, retired. It is very important, I think, when you're in the office to learn to get a sense of the issues you have to focus on and the other things that are more routine. As I say, purchase orders are routine. Whether or not an ethnic studies course is implemented and what type of curriculum it's going to have, that tends to get to be that's a pretty important topic. And in California, matter of fact, we have a requirement to, in the coming years, next couple of years, to implement ethnic studies courses as a high school graduation requirement. So that issue becomes then obviously very important. And there are various types of ethnic studies courses you can have. In our district, we sort of preempted the issue. We have implemented what's called a constructive ethnic studies course, basically a history course. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that might be interesting at the moment, but I think, though, that gives you the basics of what it's like to get onto the school board, run for election. Talk to the party. If you're a Democrat, try and get your Democratic Party endorsement. If you're a Republican, try and get their endorsement. The reason is they put those names on a mailer, send it out, and a lot of people, they just look and see who the party is recommending, and they'll vote accordingly. In my case, I can't do that. I've been walking around and distributing a 3-page letter door to door. I've hit about 2,000 houses. So
yeah, no, I know when it's done, it can be as much work as you want or as little work. And that goes for when you're on the job. And also, I feel like that goes for campaigning.
Right.
I would just add that when I was on, we call them school committees here in Rhode Island. So we have 36 school districts and we call them school committees, not school boards, but it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And I remember telling people, all you have to do is get one more vote than someone else, right? There is no qualification. There is no educational background needed. And so I think that surprises some people, but again, that's how it is. Libby, I'm going to shift to you now. How can parents and concerned citizens be most effective when voting and supporting candidates who are running for school board?
Well, I think it's a really important question to sort of set the table first. Is parents have to know when the elections are happening. Many states run their elections on off cycles. So they'll happen in the spring. They'll have their own timeline, so they can go as early as January till as late as May. So number one, parents have to be engaged and knowing what's happening with their local community. Number two is I think parents need to understand the power of the school board. Christopher just gave a really good overview of all the different ways someone can be on the school board and the ways you can use that power. But school boards have immense amount of power. And so to really know what kind of candidates you're voting for, you need to understand what decisions they might have the opportunity to make. For example, here in Wisconsin, where I'm located, school boards make the majority of our curriculum decisions. The state mandates some specific requirements on topics, but what curriculum looks like and what books are used, et cetera, is all done at the local school board level. So parents understanding those powers is really critical. And then the third, and I think the most important aspect of having parents engage with school board candidates is supporting candidates up to and through the election. One of the things that I think the public school establishment has done immensely well, and that it took the pandemic for parents and community members to respond to, is not only providing the important sort of signatory support of putting a name on a mailer like Christopher mentioned, but it's also funding the school board elections. In Wisconsin, we saw that, the Democrat Party would routinely give between $3,000 and $5,000 to each candidate just to help with their campaigns. And if you're a self-funded parent going against somebody who just got $5,000 basically for free, that can really make or break your name ID in the election and how much people are paying attention. And last but certainly not least, when I say supporting through the election, being a school board member is a really hard job. And it's something that you're often in the minority if you don't have members who are aligned with you on the same issues. And so you're fighting month after month, meeting after meeting, to try to get sometimes minor, sometimes major wins. And so the community really has to be engaged in supporting those candidates and those members, because otherwise we're going to have too much turnover and we're going to lose the really important ground that we've gained over the last 2 years.
That's a really good point as I think back now to my time, which is now 10 years ago, but how it can become so all-consuming. And so it's not only are you so busy with your children and you're fully consumed by this, all of the different things on your mind from being on the school board, but you're also taking pretty constant slings and arrows. And so sometimes it seems like that support just looks like sending a text or a note to say, I know you had a tough meeting last night, I'm thinking of you, because I think that, again, it can be kind of isolating, especially if you are the only one or just one of a couple people that are really speaking out, particularly around issues that can get very controversial and very unpleasant really quickly. So thank you for that. I'm going to go back to Chris. Actually, no, the first thing I wanted to mention is I did want to just make sure people listening understand. Not everybody calls them school boards, which I said before, we called them committees here, but other things to be listening for. Some places call them a board of trustees. And the other thing is that some places do not have elected school boards. They have appointed school boards. And what we're seeing a little bit more of now too is sometimes it's a hybrid. So they'll have maybe on a board of 10, they'll have 5 people who were elected and 5 people who are appointed. And obviously, it's much harder for the average parent who's just sort of activating and get engaged. Being appointed is difficult because in many cases, that's kind of one of those things where the fix is already in, and it's sort of a very political decision. Sad but true. So again, it's just important that if you're like, well, I don't even see the word school board anywhere in my city or town, it could be called something else. It might be a school committee. It might be a board of trustees. So keep looking until you find what it is, because it doesn't mean that you don't have one. Okay, Chris, now back to you.
Sure.
What does the school board actually do? What are they in charge of? Who are they in charge of? And what power do they have?
Well, in California, our main task is to hire the superintendent. He's the chief executive officer of the school district. We are not supposed to get involved in day-to-day management, but we appoint the superintendent. We determine the terms of employment. We fire the superintendent if need be. That happened about 4 years ago. I was newly elected to the school board. We had to get rid of one. He left before we could give him the boot. The other things we do, we will adopt the budget. We don't do the actual number crunching for the budget. We're not supposed to be accountants, but we pose critical questions to our chief business officer, to the superintendent. We do look through the numbers, and then we approve the budget. The budget in our case, it also goes to the county for the county board of education for approval. They have a supervisory role. We decide about awarding contracts. Anything above $25,000 in our school district has to be approved by the school board. Again, we don't normally delve into the details of the contract, but we take a look at them, and if we notice something a bit odd, as a lawyer, I tend to read them perhaps a little bit more in detail than others. We'll pose questions and maybe have a point revisited. A lot of our job is simply interfacing with the public because we are members of the public. None of us has a career as a school board member. We were normal citizens who got interested in what was going on in the school district, ran for office, got elected, and then we represent the public in the interface with the school. When a parent files a complaint, we may often be the first contact point for that parent. What we do, though, all of my fellow board members are very good at this. We refer the matter to the superintendent because he has the tools to investigate whether the complaint is justified, but we keep our eyes on how the investigation is running. And the investigations can be anything from a bullying incident to what books are in the school library to any number of things.
And quick question for you, just out of curiosity, do you find that often it makes more sense for a parent to first go directly to the people in their school building before reaching out to the school board, or do you just think that it depends on the issue?
Well, it depends on the issue. Often, if it's something having to do with the individual student, a student-specific issue, it's good. Parents should go to the school administrator, initially perhaps even just the teacher, because that's where we're going to refer the parent to it anyway. Now, if it has to do with a larger issue about whether, I don't know, rainbow flags are displayed in classrooms, we had that issue, then the teacher isn't going to have anything to say about it. It's got to go up to the superintendent. That one eventually went to the school board. So it just depends on how general the issue is. Main thing, go talk to a person who's sort of in charge. They will, and follow up, ask, what happened to my complaint? Did you forward it on to whoever is responsible in the organization for handling these type of issues?
Okay, thanks. And I'm just going to add too, before I shift over to Libby, usually school boards are also in charge of approving bus routes and school start times. And those can be very sort of hot issues, particularly right at the beginning of the year. Okay, Libby, moving on to you. Do you have thoughts about how parents can, to use a friendly word, encourage, or to use a more intense word, really put pressure on school boards to be transparent about what they are doing and what they are in charge of?
It's a great question, and I have lots of thoughts. So first, I just want to reiterate something that Christopher said, because I think it's really critical. The school board sets the policy, but the administration is the one that implements it. And so when parents are wanting to encourage or pressure school boards to be transparent, they're often bringing issues that intersect both with administration and the school board to light. And that dynamic between the superintendent and the school board is a really critical one to understand. In some cases, it's a really good relationship in which the board works really closely with the superintendent. And in others, you have a real tension between the school board and the administration. So first, understanding the extent by which your school board can create transparency versus being an administration problem is a really important step. The second thing I think parents have to know is you have to know your rights. There are specific statutory rights, both under most state laws and under the federal law for parents. What's known as the Pupil Protection Rights Act says that parents should have access to ask to see their child's curriculum, should be able to opt their child out of surveys on specific controversial topics. They have a right to go to see their child and observe their child in their classroom. And what's so interesting is most school boards have these policies on the books, but they kind of just get forgotten about. And so when parents raise these rights, school boards are like, or administration will say, well, we can't do that. And so understanding your rights and really being able to point to resources, whether it's at Parents Defending Education or organizations like mine at Will, we're really trying to empower parents to be able to stand up and say, no, these are my rights. I want to follow the policy, but I have a right to participate in my child's education. The last thing I'd say is that you really have to understand how both public records and public meetings laws work. Being able to access information from your local school district is not going to be the easiest thing you've ever done. You're going to have to jump through hoops. You're going to have to go through policies. And primarily, those policies are in place for a reason, but understanding when you're being kind of brought along a little bit too far and when something's being reasonable is a really critical aspect for parents as they're trying to determine how can I encourage my school board to be more transparent. I'm a big believer of letting the sunlight in. I think if you bring attention to issues, if you can force the conversation to happen at a school board meeting, that is the first critical step in creating meaningful and sustainable change at your local school district. But you got to do the work to get there, which can be a little daunting.
You're reminding me, when I first was elected to our school board in 2010, there was a book of policies, and those were the policies that I had been elected to, implement to be sure that we were following these policies. Well, there was one copy of the book, and it lived in the office of the superintendent, and the relationship was not a warm one or a very healthy one at the time. And I remember saying, well, it says, am I going to get a copy of that? No, you'd have to make an appointment to come view the policies in the superintendent's office. I said, you want me to get a babysitter and go so I can look at the policies that I'm now in charge of, sort of like overseeing, right? And we had I don't know if there's a law, an ordinance, something saying there was supposed to be a policy manual in every school, a policy manual in the public library. There was one copy, and it was like this thing. And I remember somebody saying to me, you have to keep knocking, because I was badgering them about this, and they were just kind of saying, nope, you got to make an appointment. And this person said, keep knocking, keep knocking, keep knocking. Fast forward a couple weeks, and a courier arrives at the houses of every single school board member with the policy manual, not in a binder, just a stack of papers that was like this tall in a manila envelope. But the point is, to your point, you have to push, because they will, again, they will try to not have to do these things and make their lives easier, and sunlight cannot get in. If you have to make an appointment and get a babysitter to view the policies, there's no sunlight getting in. And so, and to your point too about federal law and state law, and how often the school boards, the members, the administrators in the school, and even the attorneys, they are often just not up to speed on any of this. And so what I've noticed is that parents became sort of experts on the PPRA, right? That federal law that allows you to view materials and opt your kids out of surveys. It was the first time that a lot of people working in school districts were ever hearing of it. I had an experience with my own child's school. They're not being trained in it. They're not learning about it. And so, and for a long time, they didn't need to, because nobody was really, talking about or using it, because there was a time where, information wasn't being hidden from parents, and or kids weren't discussing issues in school that were, that were, what's the word, controversial or related to issues that it seems that a parent should at least get alerted. So anyway, okay. Scarlen, finally, you're up. Oh, wait, but I had to flip over. I wanted to also say to people, when Libby mentions Will, she's talking about the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. So it's not a guy. It's the organization where she works. They have great resources too, so you should check them out. Okay. Scarlen. So Scarlen has her ear to the ground. She is in contact with parents all the time, and she's also a parent advocate herself. I recently watched footage of her at her own school board meeting, standing at the podium, discussing the issue of surveys and parents and the whole issue of being allowed to opt out. So she's a great advocate in her own right, but she has also really transferred those skills to helping other parents all over the country become better advocates where they live. So Scarlen, you're talking to parents across the country every day.
Mm-hmm.
What happens at a school board meeting, and how do you think, in terms of like, how do they work, right? Parents never been to one before, they decide they're going to go. How do they work? What are they going to see? And how can they be most effective when attending?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Erika. School board meetings nowadays can be either very exciting or extremely boring. And it all really depends on the agenda, which I'll get to in a little bit. It really depends how many school board meetings there are per month. It depends on the board in your county or in your states or in your cities. Here in Tennessee, Hamilton County, there are 2 meetings a month. There's a work session, and then there's the regular meeting session. And sometimes, depending on the laws in your state, these sessions have to be separate, so a separate day, or they can be kind of mushed together into the same night, which is the case here in my county. We have the work session that starts at 4:30, and then right after maybe like an hour or two, there's the actual session where other participants can join in. A lot of states do put out the agenda. I have noticed that in smaller, more rural districts, agendas aren't really out, but in most cases, the agenda is out within a week or 2 in advance. And I would say that it's super important that parents look at that agenda. The amount of things that I have caught in agendas and brought to parents' attentions, I can't even count. There are so many things. On those agendas, you'll find new policies that will be taking place, new policies that are going to be discussed, field trips, speakers, all sorts of really juicy things that you can find in there. Some school board meetings do have public comment. It's really important that you check out the school district's website to see what your school board meeting looks like, what the structure looks like, because that's where you'll find all of the details that you would need. So some school board meetings are via Zoom. I know that school board meetings in Washington State are still via Zoom. A lot of the majority of the states, though, do have in person, and you either have to sign up a few weeks in advance, 30 minutes in advance. Sometimes you have to get approval about what you can speak on. Some school boards only allow parents or people to speak only on the topics on the agenda. Some have more liberal policies where anyone can come up and speak on whatever it is that they want. There are time limits, sometimes depending on your school district. Again, I know that here in my county, we have a 5-minute time frame. And school members typically are not supposed to engage with the person speaking, but I've kind of seen it doesn't always happen. What really ends up happening is the school board can engage with the parent or the speaker, but the speaker can't respond back. So I've heard some pretty nasty comments being made towards parents, and parents can't really defend themselves. I've spoken at several school board meetings, and I really think one of the best pieces of advice that I can give parents is to write out or type out what you're going to say, because whether you get 30 seconds to 5 minutes, if your thoughts aren't on paper or on your phone, then you can kind of lose track of the time, and you can kind of lose credibility when it seems like you don't know what you're talking about. And of course, you must be respectful, no matter how infuriating the issue might be or how frustrating a situation might be. We have to remain respectful. I've been able to successfully have school board members from all sides of a political party agree with me because I brought in facts, because I was respectful. So that's really some of the tips that I have.
A couple things that you just made me think of that I think could be helpful to the people that are watching. I see a lot of people complaining, especially on social media, that the school board is just sitting there. They're not responding. They're not engaging. And I think your point is that many of them have written into their bylaws that they are not supposed to be directly engaging with people during public comment, right? So it could be that the person listening has lots of things that they want to say. They might even agree with you, but some have really sort of like strict norms that are spelled out in their bylaws that they're just not supposed to engage during public comment. So as frustrating as it is, I think, because people think they don't even care, they're not even saying anything. It's not that now it's possible that they don't care, right? But it's not fair to assume at all that the fact that they're not engaging means that they're not listening and that they don't care. It's just that they're often they're just not supposed to engage, especially in a back and forth type of thing. So you'll notice if that starts, it gets shut down really quickly. All right, Scarlen, thank you for that. Now, Chris, you sit on the other side here. You're the one that has people speaking during public comment to you. And I'm sure that you have heard a lot of really persuasive comments from the public. And you've probably also heard some really
crazy.
What's the word I'm looking for? Not only not persuasive, but even comment that it could have been persuasive had it been done in a different way. So I guess what I'm asking from you is what recommendations would you give to parents that are planning on coming up and, speaking at the podium at a public meeting so that they can, best be heard and so that they can be most effective and most persuasive?
Sure. Well, we give our parents, any public speaker, they have the right to speak for 3 minutes on an issue which is on the agenda or not on the agenda. They can speak about whatever they wish. And hold on a second. I can't do this. So sorry, the phone there. They can speak on whatever issue they wish to speak about. Now, it helps they speak on point and they engage in civil discourse. We have a couple of people who they think when they get up there, they have to harangue the school board, and they don't say a single thing of substance, but it's 3 minutes of loud yelling, and we let them sort of blow off steam there, but it has absolutely no effect. And if it gets too bad, we've had one fellow who we actually had to get a temporary restraining order against because he was also starting to come into the district office during the day and blow off steam. But stay on point, do your homework on what you're talking about, and keep it civil. Those are the main aspects I can give to the parents.
All right, so civility for the win, and let's avoid the profanity when we are at the podium or at the lectern, especially
Sure.
when we're trying to convince people to do something that we want them to do. Libby, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yes, I'll just add that I think it's going back to understanding what you're asking your school board to do. Is what you're upset about, is it something that school board has the authority to change? There's a lot of attention around the changes coming down from Title IX around the sports and how gender identity plays into sports and decisions on bathrooms. That's coming down from the federal government. So your school board could be completely aligned with you and having to make decisions based off of something that's coming down from the federal government. So I guess I would just encourage parents to really try to understand the issues, use resources that are out there before coming to talk to their school board, because we want to create sustainable and meaningful change at the school board level, but we need to do that in a respectful way and in a way that's in line with the powers the school board actually has.
That is an excellent point. That's another thing that I feel like we see all the time is that people want changes to be made by people who don't have the authority or the power to make those changes. Certainly. And I think that's true not only with stuff coming down from the federal government, but also from the state, because we saw lots of changes around 2016 around gender expansive policies, transgender policies, gender support plans. And again, that all was coming from the state. And even though they call it guidance, it seems like a lot of the districts feel that it's more than guidance. They think that they have an obligation to follow it. And they worry, I think, that there'll be consequences for them if they don't. So again, are we asking the right people to make these changes that we are looking for? Okay, so we have a few questions from the audience. So we'll take a couple of those. What do you say? I mean, I think we've sort of have covered this because we have one person who's basically saying my school board members are not great. And do we have to wait till the next election cycle to vote them out? or is there a way for us to speed up that process and get them out sooner? I think I'll start with you, Libby, since you, I think, would know about these recall laws.
Yes, so I want to give the very typical lawyer caveat that every state has different recall laws and procedures. So I'm not speaking on one specific state, but in general, most states have a recall process for public officials, including school board members, and they require usually some similar traits. For example, identifying the school board member or a public official, identifying the reason for the recall that's aligned with state law for why they can be recalled. And then 3, typically identifying a specific number of signatures or community support, signifying that this effort has support. I will tell you, while I think recall efforts can be very appropriate in certain circumstances, the data shows us that they're not all that successful in the long term. Our friends at Ballotpedia do a lot of really great work of looking at school board races across the country. And so in 2021, they found that there were 92 recalls across the country, and only one official was recalled from those efforts. And so when we talk about a recall, I think you have to think about 2 different things. Are you recalling somebody because there's a real significant issue that's going to create a base of support that says this person is unfit for public office? Or should you spend your time, money, and effort really developing and creating community support for a candidate that could beat them in the next election? I know that's not the answer everybody wants. We'd much rather be able to remove people who we don't feel like are doing a good job from office more quickly. But I think when I'm thinking about parents and community members who I speak with, I want to think about what's the most effective way for you to use your power and your resources. And I think really considering carefully whether a recall is going to be the most effective, given the likelihood of success is pretty low, is something that should be considered.
Okay, that's excellent. And also just a reminder, even though I think Chris had mentioned this, that it is possible sometimes for there to be, for a person to leave and then someone else comes on, but that's usually because a seat is vacated. Either somebody does not fulfill their requirements in that role, or for whatever reason they have to leave. And then usually that ends up being an appointed seat. So good luck getting that seat. But it does happen. Okay, I guess lastly, I just wanted to mention, and Scarlen, you talked about this too, but I guess could you just talk a little bit about we have a lot of resources on our website at PDE for people who are for the very first time deciding, I'm going to go to a school board meeting. I'm going to start, getting involved. I'm going to learn the names of the people on my local school board, which again, like most people don't know them or didn't know them, until 2020. So can you just think about, again, questions you think people should ask or potential resources that they should seek out that we have that could just help them as they're beginning this process?
Absolutely. Our website has plenty of resources that anyone could utilize to, one, understand how our school boards work, and also see if a school board member could be recalled or not. That resource from Ballotpedia that Libby was talking about is actually one of the resources that we have on our website as well. You also want to know what kind of questions to ask, right? We also have a resource for that on our PD website. I would just reiterate that we must remain respectful when we are addressing our school board members, no matter how we may feel about them, because that's truly how you're going to get conversation started within your school board. Some questions that you can ask to your school board could be around gender ideology, social emotional curriculum or surveys that are in place. Or you can also ask about any policies regarding race. I know that we can find a lot of those within our school board as well.
Okay, it's time for final thoughts. First, I'm going to go to Scarlen. Scarlen, what are your final thoughts for parents on this subject?
Some of my final thoughts, it's not really a thought, more of a challenge. If you've never been a part of your school board meeting, if you've never gone to a school board meeting, I would challenge you to go to a school board meeting, find a topic that you want to talk about, and go talk about it and tell us how it went.
Okay, Chris, how about you?
2 points. First, you don't have to wait for a school board meeting to talk to a school board member. You can make appointments and talk about whatever's on your, whatever your concerns are with the school board member, and you can take a lot more than 3 minutes. I've had some of the best meetings I've had have been with constituents who asked for a 1 hour meeting, and they were very good. And second point, use the opportunity to actually sit in your child's classes. Most schools have a requirement that they have to allow parents to participate. I suggest you make use of that. That is how you will see what's really going on in class.
Excellent. And lastly, Libby, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are one, you shouldn't be afraid because you're not alone. If you're questioning whether something feels right in your school board decisions or what's happening in your child's classroom, it feels really scary in today's culture to sort of question, is this right, or am I coming from a bad place? You're not. You are your child's best advocate. You know what's best for your child. And so don't be afraid to ask questions and use the rights that you have, because the best sustainable change we're going to have in education is going to come from our parents and their local communities.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to, I think, wrap it up. So this was great, everybody. I certainly learned a lot that I didn't already know, and I already sort of know a lot. So that's really pretty awesome. And so basically, everybody, what we're saying is get engaged as much as you can and, begin asking questions about what's happening in your children's schools. Check out our resources at Parents Defending Education. Go to the website that I just mentioned a second ago. I want to get it perfectly right. Which is Wisconsin Institute for Liberty and Law. They have a lot of resources as well. And I think with that, we're going to say goodnight. Just a reminder, if you have something going on in your school district and you need help, something doesn't seem right, or maybe you have questions about an upcoming meeting or something happened at a school board meeting that has you concerned, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at defendinged.org, and we can either help point you in the right direction, provide support, or at least help you, brainstorm what your next steps may be. And with that, everybody, I'm going to sign off. Again, thank you to my guests, Scarlen, Christopher, and Libby. And with that, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.